So now that we've spent time thinking through whether the legal department needs to be handling all the different aspects of the contracting process or somebody in the business, let's review, of course, the main question of what requires a lawyer. And that presumes we're speaking, of course, about the legal department. Are there things that other roles can handle because their roles are actually so connected with contracts that they might even be better at it than kind of a fresh lawyer or, somebody who's a deep commercial transactions lawyer but maybe hasn't dealt with those types of commercial transactions. So there are contract managers who are really, really experienced, and many of them actually have law degrees. They're just not in the role of representing the company as an attorney or in the capacity of an attorney, but they might have that experience in their background, but they definitely have the hands-on experience. Similarly, with sales professionals, there are sales teams who are absolute wizards with contracts. They may not like doing them, but boy, they are very capable, and they just need to be put in that position and told that that is the job function that they have now. And of course, procurement experts, they pride themselves in being expert negotiators. So that would be a great team to look at or function if it exists in your company, if you come up with the conclusion that a lawyer from the law department doesn't really need to handle certain aspects of the process or of the contract. Now, more interestingly, as you look into the legal department, is to ask yourself whether it's an attorney or perhaps another professional under the direction of the legal department or under the direction of attorney inside the legal department, if they can handle certain aspects. Let's say, based on whatever exploration you've been able to do, there's a decision at the company that legal department should be playing, a significant role and taking lots of steps in the contracting process, for example. It could very well be that the law department is staffed in a way that other professionals inside the legal team can handle a lot of those steps that perhaps were before done by an attorney. It's very common in-house, especially as departments grow, to bring on paraprofessionals, paralegals, contract managers, contract specialists, even administrative staff that has interest or skills to grow into the contracting function. Because again, you're not necessarily delegating very complex legal principles. You could be delegating steps of the contracting process. For example, signature. That's an example I keep giving because when I see lawyers having to run around looking for signatures when they also have, paralegals in other parts of the department, my first request is why not at least ask if those paralegals, perhaps they are not assigned to commercial transaction work, but maybe they can pick up some of these steps. So once the decision's been made that the particular functions need to live in the legal department, whatever those functions are based on the matrix that you conclude, then ask yourself, even if it's inside the legal department, does it need an attorney to perform that particular task? Then the next question is, if you decide that an attorney is needed, because that's the skill set, the requisite that you have, well, do you have that in-house? Meaning, do you have enough people to scale to perform these functions? Or do you need to seek help outside? Do you need to find an external resource that can help you perform some of these tasks? Maybe you've decided that you don't need an attorney, but you don't have any other types of paraprofessionals that you can leverage for this kind of work. So then that's another reason to consider looking for those kind of resources outside the legal department. Once that decision is made that you want to look externally for contract review functions or contract administration functions, then oftentimes the next question I get is around outsourcing. There's obviously a lot of talk and interest about outsourcing contracts. This wasn't the case, I would say even 10 plus years ago, but right now it is a very common set of tasks that legal departments are looking to outsource. Outsourcing, of course, has its own nuances, and it is not something that is easy to do in the context of, handling, for example, a relationship with a law firm where you can pretty much send them contracts and they just handle it and have, full authority and decision-making power and very little oversight from the client, from you, from the law department. With outsourcing, it requires a lot more hands-on planning and oversight. Outsourcing, in the context that I'm describing here, isn't simply the function of getting an external party to help. That is the most basic definition of outsourcing. I mean something much more holistic. Really, what I'm referring to is more accurately described as a managed service, where you're handing the entire function, basically, the entire series of steps over to the other side. And it is their job to manage those steps and that function most efficiently and most effectively. In return, you get insights and learnings, but it is in a very programmatic way. There is a rhythm, there's a methodology, there's an approach, there's technology being deployed usually, there's insights that are measured and tracked and reported on a preset cadence. It's quite robust. So that's really the direction that I'm considering when I think about outsourcing a contracting function, because it is recurring. When you have a function that's recurring like this, you get much more value in considering a managed service than you do in simply handing it to outside counsel or to a contractor type of resource. You can't outsource what you don't understand, meaning you need to have somebody in-house who really knows this work in order to be able to hand it off. It's unlike the high-level, high-complexity work that you hand to a law firm and you outsource it, quote unquote, because you just need somebody else with the skill set to do it. This isn't the same at all. This is actually something that you know how to do, you just don't want to do it because it's not efficient use of your time. But you have to know what it is. You don't want to be in a position to hand off something to a third party that you're not familiar with, especially because managed services become quite sticky in their relationship. Once you've outsourced something effectively, it tends to go on for several years, if not almost in perpetuity, because it becomes a natural extension to the law department, which is actually a good thing if done right. You should definitely be demanding insights and feedback of information from the outsourced provider. That is table stakes. They should be educating you on everything they're doing on your behalf. Oftentimes when we hand work off to law firms in the traditional models, we don't really learn much from what they handle on our behalf. They handle it well and with quality, but we don't learn much of the insights that they gain in their experience. And that's a loss. So we want to make sure that you're always gleaming those insights and that they're providing information to you on an ongoing basis. You should also require continuous improvement. The more of this work that an outsourced provider does for your department over time, the more they're learning, the more efficient they should become. You should expect to see a rise in efficiency. You have to find a way to measure and track it, of course, but you should be demanding that they are going to continuously improve. And as I just mentioned, of course, tracking and measuring. You can't think about outsourcing without thinking about tracking and measuring. That is one of the best ways to maintain the relationship in a healthy, data-driven way. You have to know the amount of work that's flowing through, what type of work it is, how long all of these contracts are taking, all the basic things that I described earlier around data insights. Well, now the beauty of it is you have somebody who 100% has this as part of the function that they're providing. Outsourced service providers are excellent at tracking data and measuring it because they do it for their own efficiencies. They make more money by being more efficient because they are driven by profitability, unlike a typical law firm structure. But let's talk about law firms for a minute. I find this to be a very interesting nuance right now. I mentioned managed legal services, and they are very uncommon for law firms because the traditional way that they make money, as we know, is by the billable hour. Well, they handle overflow very commonly for in-house teams. Oftentimes, when an in-house team gets buried with commercial transactions, the first thing they do is just send it to outside counsel. Let's just get it to somebody there who knows how to do this, and they can simply pick it up. And it's a very worry-free type of an arrangement, but it is expensive, it is unpredictable, it's uninformative as to the work itself, it's certainly not scalable as work ebbs and flows, And it's really just not a sustainable long-term plan. Over time, it becomes simply cost prohibitive. Over time, you lose insights. Over time, it starts to really lose its value on its face. So we are seeing more and more managed legal services popping up from law firms. It's not very common. They've done it in handfuls of situations where very likely it's the client or the corporate legal team that is requesting it or almost demanding it, perhaps even pushing the law firm to do something like this, because the in-house team sees the benefits of the quality that law firms provide. Obviously, law firms provide quality, top-notch legal service. That's what they're known for. That's why we all sleep well at night when law firms are handling the work from a substantive perspective. But we know how expensive these things get, and when you have repeated and ongoing work, it's just simply not the right solution. But law firms aren't ready to offer a managed legal service. They need to be able to work very closely with the client to develop something like this. So if I leave you with anything on this topic, it's consider trying to have conversations like these with the law firms. It's not easy because oftentimes the in-house team lacks the data itself to be able to even give predictability to the law firm of how many contracts do they have? What's the level of resource that they expect? What's the turnaround time that they want? These are all things that can be worked out together. Outsourcing companies are very used to doing this. Law firms simply aren't because it doesn't work with their business model. I will say the one big distinction with the outsourcing companies is the skill set. In order for them to be profitable, they can't hire highly paid, top-notch, oftentimes, licensed lawyers. They're sometimes bringing in professionals that aren't licensed. Maybe they have experience that is very aligned to it, but don't have that qualification to practice law, or they have people who've chosen a different career track, and there have been questions around quality. That might be an okay risk to take if you are doing repeatable, kind of lower level recurring work that is very easy to create a playbook and empowerment guide combination around, where you're giving very, very strict and clear black and white guidance. That's what outsourcing to a alternative service provider is really valuable. That is kind of what you hear most often is alternative legal service providers in this context of contract review. ALSPs, legal service providers, LSPs, they used to be called LPOs, legal process outsourcers, all are types of service providers that oftentimes are not staffed with qualified or licensed lawyers in their jurisdiction in order to provide a lower cost option to their clients. But this is why I say there's hope. I think law firms are starting to realize that there's opportunities that they are missing, and some are starting to get in this space. It's a slightly nuanced area, but I did want to bring it up for those who are really forward thinking and trying to push the envelope on modernizing their legal service. Happens to be a topic very near and dear to my heart, which is why I wrote a book, The Simple Guide to Legal Innovation. But I digress. All lawyers need to be innovative these days. We really can't afford not to be.